The relentless sun beat down on the cracked earth of the Arizona Territory, a desolate expanse where silence was the most common sound, broken only by the whispers of the wind. Jedediah, a man weathered by years on the dusty trails, his Stetson pulled low against the glare, rode his weary horse Jericho across the endless scrubland. He wasn't chasing a bounty or seeking a quarrel, just making his way to the next town, a small outpost hoping to escape the lawlessness that plagued these frontiers. The air was thick with the scent of dry earth and distant sagebrush, and the only company he'd known for days was the rhythmic creak of his saddle. His mind was on the dwindling water in his canteen and the promise of a cool drink in a saloon, a fleeting thought that momentarily pushed away the ever-present loneliness that came with his solitary life. Suddenly, a disturbance in the otherwise monotonous landscape caught his keen eye. A freshly dug mound of earth, oddly out of place, rose amidst the sparse, sun-baked bushes. Curiosity, a dangerous companion in these parts, tugged at him. He dismounted, leading Jericho closer, his hand instinctively resting on the worn grip of his revolver. As he rounded the small heap of excavated dirt, his breath hitched. There, in the center of a perfectly dug grave, sat a young woman. She was motionless, her dress covered in dust, her eyes, wide and unnervingly calm, staring straight ahead at nothing in particular. She looked almost ethereal against the harsh reality of her surroundings, a ghost waiting for an unknown burial. The only sound was the frantic thumping of his own heart against the quiet, vast wilderness. Jedediah, a man accustomed to the raw brutality of the West, found himself utterly disarmed by the scene. He had seen death in its many forms, but never a soul willingly awaiting it with such profound stillness. His voice, usually gruff, came out as a hesitant whisper. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The words felt inadequate, almost foolish, in the face of such a desperate tableau. She didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge his presence. It was as if she were made of stone, or perhaps already a part of the earth around her. A sudden gust of wind whipped dust around them, momentarily obscuring her delicate features, but her gaze remained fixed, unwavering. A profound sense of urgency, alien to his usual stoicism, washed over him, telling him he couldn't just ride away. He knew he had to act, even if he didn't understand why she was there. He carefully approached the edge of the grave, his shadow falling over her. "What are you doing, ma'am? You can't just sit there." Her silence was deafening, a wall he couldn't breach. He extended a hand, a gesture of unexpected tenderness from a man whose hands were usually calloused from rope and iron. "Come on, let's get you out of there." As his hand brushed hers, he felt a tremor, a faint spark of life in her otherwise rigid form. It was a fleeting moment, but enough to solidify his resolve. He wasn't sure what dark path had led her to dig her own grave, but he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he couldn't leave her there. The sun dipped lower, casting long, eerie shadows across the desert and the silence of the grave deepened, heavy with unspoken stories. With a cautious strength, Jedediah helped the woman, who finally introduced herself as Eliza, out of the grave. Her movements were stiff, her gaze still distant, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes now, perhaps apprehension, perhaps relief. He offered her his canteen, and she drank deeply, the water running in rivulets down her parched chin. He noticed the faint bruises on her wrists, a detail that sent a cold wave of suspicion through him. "What happened, Eliza?" he asked, his voice softer than she probably expected. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the horizon as if expecting something to emerge from the shimmering heat haze. The silence stretched, filled only by the wind whistling through the dry grasses. Finally, her voice, raspy and barely audible, broke the quiet. "They're coming for me." Her words were a chilling whisper, carrying a weight of fear that was palpable. She didn't elaborate, but the terror in her eyes was enough. Jedediah, a man who trusted his instincts above all else, felt a surge of protectiveness. He knew what they usually meant in this unforgiving land: outlaws, vengeful enemies, or something far worse. He didn't press her for details, understanding that time was of the essence. His priority shifted from reaching a town to finding a safe haven, a place where he could perhaps understand the full extent of the danger she faced. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, a beautiful but deceptive backdrop to the underlying threat that now overshadowed them both. They rode through the twilight, Jedediah's gaze constantly scanning the horizon, his hand never far from his Colt. Eliza rode Jericho with him, her small frame pressed against his, and even though she remained mostly silent, her presence was a constant reminder of the urgent danger. He tried to think of a place, any place that offered even a modicum of safety. A small, forgotten cave, an abandoned cabin, anything to get them out of the open. The vastness of the desert suddenly felt less like freedom and more like exposure. The air grew cooler, and the stars began to prickle the inky blackness above, each one a silent witness to their perilous journey. The weight of her unspoken story pressed down on him, a heavy burden that he now shared. As the moon cast long, eerie shadows, Eliza finally spoke again, her voice still quiet but with a newfound urgency. She began to recount, in disjointed fragments, a tale of a ruthless gang, a family secret, and a betrayal that had left her with nothing but a grave and a desperate hope for escape. She spoke of a map, a legacy hidden from prying eyes, and a group of men who would stop at nothing to get their hands on it. Jedediah listened, his jaw tight, his grip on Jericho's reins tightening. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, revealing a far more intricate and dangerous game than he had initially imagined. This wasn't just about saving a damsel in distress. It was about uncovering a truth that could cost them both their lives. They reached a secluded, dilapidated cabin just before dawn, a structure barely clinging to existence against the elements, but offering at least the illusion of shelter. Inside, gust motes danced in the slivers of light filtering through cracks in the walls, illuminating the emptiness. Eliza collapsed onto a makeshift bed of dry leaves, exhaustion finally claiming her. Jedediah, ever vigilant, took up a position by the single window, his eyes scanning the desolate landscape for any sign of pursuit. The details Eliza had revealed, a hidden gold mine, a ruthless family dispute, and the ruthless pursuit by a gang led by a man named Silas, a figure notorious for his cruelty, painted a grim picture. He knew Silas's reputation. A man who left no witnesses, no loose ends. As the sun climbed higher, casting the cabin in a harsh, unforgiving light, Jedediah began to piece together a plan. They couldn't stay here long. The cabin was a temporary reprieve, not a fortress. Their best bet was to reach the nearest town with a sheriff, though the law in these parts was often as corrupt as the outlaws it was meant to control. He cleaned his revolver, its metallic click a stark sound in the quiet cabin, checking each chamber, ensuring it was ready for the inevitable confrontation. He also tended to Eliza's few possessions, noticing a small leather-bound journal clutched in her hand. He didn't open it, respecting her privacy, but he knew it likely held the key to the secrets that haunted her. Eliza, now more rested, began to provide clearer details, her initial terror slowly giving way to a fierce determination. She described how Silas, her own uncle, had murdered her father to gain control of a legendary map leading to a hidden gold strike. She was the only one who knew the true location of the map, and Silas was willing to go to any lengths to extract that information from her. The weight of her family's legacy, a burden that had led her to contemplate ending her own life, now spurred her to fight. Jedediah saw not just a frightened woman, but a survivor, a strength that resonated with his own resilient spirit. Their shared predicament forged an unspoken bond, a silent pact of survival in a world that offered little mercy. Just as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting long, menacing shadows across the barren land, a distant cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. Jedediah's gut clenched. They had been found. Silas and his men, a relentless force, were closing in. He quickly instructed Eliza to prepare, grabbing his rifle. "They're here," he said, his voice grim but resolute. "Time to face the music." The quiet tension in the cabin shattered, replaced by the thumping of their hearts, the rustle of clothing, and the harsh reality of their desperate situation. The cabin, once a fragile sanctuary, now felt like a trap, and the storm they had been trying to outrun had finally arrived. The roar of hooves grew louder, echoing across the desolate landscape as Silas's gang, a dozen hardened men, surrounded the small cabin. Jedediah, rifle poised, peered through a gap in the wooden planks, his jaw set. Eliza, though terrified, stood bravely by his side, a loaded revolver clutched in her trembling hands. "Eliza, give us the map." Silas's voice, a chilling baritone, cut through the air, amplified by the vastness of the plains. "You can't escape us." Jedediah knew retreat was impossible. This was their stand, their only chance. The air crackled with tension, thick with the smell of dust and impending violence. The first shots rang out, splintering the cabin walls as bullets tore through the aged wood. Jedediah returned fire, aiming for the riders, forcing them to scatter and take cover. Eliza, surprising him with her resolve, fired a few shots herself, aiming for legs and arms, not death, but enough to deter. The fight was chaotic, a flurry of gunfire, shouts, and the thud of bodies hitting the ground. Jedediah moved with a practiced efficiency, reloading his rifle, aiming with deadly precision. He had faced desperate men before, but the ruthlessness of Silas's gang, fueled by greed and a disregard for life, was chilling. He knew he had to protect Eliza, not just for her sake, but for the truth she carried. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in streaks of blood red and bruised purple, the gunfight intensified. Silas, frustrated by their resistance, ordered his men to try to rush the cabin. Jedediah and Eliza fought back to back, a makeshift barricade of two against a determined horde. Jedediah took a glancing blow to his arm, the pain a searing fire, but he pushed through it, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Eliza, seeing his wound, momentarily faltered, but her fear quickly transformed into a fierce protectiveness. She covered him as he reloaded, her shots precise and surprisingly effective, buying them precious seconds. The dust kicked up by the horses and the commotion swirled around them, creating a hazy, nightmarish battlefield. Finally, with a desperate surge, Jedediah, seeing an opening, charged out of the cabin, surprising a few of Silas's men. A brutal hand-to-hand struggle ensued, fists flying, bodies colliding. Silas himself joined the fray, his eyes burning with a cold fury. Just as Jedediah seemed overwhelmed, Eliza, with an unexpected burst of courage, grabbed a loose piece of wood and struck Silas, knocking him off balance. The tide of the battle slowly turned. The remaining gang members, seeing their leader momentarily incapacitated and their numbers dwindling, began to flee into the fading light, leaving Silas alone, defeated and exposed. The immediate threat was gone, but the silence that followed was heavy with the aftermath of violence and the question of what would come next. The dust settled, revealing the carnage of the battle: fallen horses, discarded weapons, and the motionless forms of Silas's men. Jedediah, his arm bleeding but his spirit unbroken, knelt beside the injured Eliza. She had taken a superficial wound to her shoulder, a painful reminder of their narrow escape. As he tended to her, a weary calm settled over them. The immediate danger had passed, but the deeper wounds, both physical and emotional, remained. He helped her up, his touch gentle, and they looked at the desolate landscape around them, the vastness suddenly feeling less threatening, more like a blank canvas for a new beginning. They decided to head towards the nearest town, not just for medical attention, but for a chance to finally bring Silas to justice and reveal the truth about the hidden map. The journey was slow, a silent testament to their shared ordeal. Eliza, no longer guarded, began to speak openly about her father's dreams, the map's significance beyond mere gold, and her desire to honor his memory by using it for good, to build something lasting in this wild land. Jedediah listened, his gaze fixed on the horizon, a flicker of hope stirring within him. He had always been a solitary man, but the unspoken camaraderie that had formed between them felt like a beacon in the vast emptiness of his life. Upon reaching a small, dusty town, they found a sympathetic sheriff, a man weary but honest, who had heard whispers of Silas's cruelty. With Eliza's testimony and the evidence Jedediah had helped secure, Silas was finally apprehended, his reign of terror brought to an end. The town, once filled with fear, breathed a collective sigh of relief. The map, retrieved from Eliza's hidden journal, was brought to light, revealing not just a gold mine, but also forgotten water sources crucial for the region's development. It was a discovery that promised prosperity, not just for individuals, but for the entire community. As the days turned into weeks, Eliza decided to stay in the town, determined to use her legacy to build a school and a hospital, transforming the frontier into a place of hope and opportunity. Jedediah, his cowboy hat still a permanent fixture, found himself lingering. The open road, once his only calling, now felt less compelling. He had found something he hadn't known he was looking for, a purpose, a connection, a reason to stay. He watched Eliza from afar, her resolve unwavering, her spirit shining brighter than the desert sun. The man who had found a girl waiting silently in her own grave now saw her building a future, and in that future he found a quiet, unexpected peace, ready to face whatever dawn brought with her by his side. The silent grave had given way to the silent promise of a life rebuilt.